At the dawn of the three-dimensional era, the publishers, the decision-makers, the movers, and the shakers looked at this new frontier, where suddenly so many things felt possible, with fully defined characters, free-range movement, and anything you could imagine at your fingertips. They saw this new frontier, threw their hands up, and said, what if we just did the old games again? Yes, uninspired exploitation of intellectual property is a tale as old as time. And in the late 90s, developers tried to reimagine Pong, Pac-Man, Space Invaders, Asteroids, Frogger, Q*bert, and Missile Command, to name just a few. Some, like Pac-Man World, are radical reimaginings of the originals, but most of them really betray a complete lack of inspiration past, what if we just did the old games again? Led by Richard Rouse, who would later come to minor fame as the developer of the 2004 horror game, The Suffering, the company Leaping Lizard Software developed a 3D reboot of 1981's Centipede. Centipede was an Atari game, where you piloted a craft identified only as the Bug Blaster, and maneuvered through a field of mushrooms that served as impediments while trying to shoot each section of a centipede that was rapidly descending down the screen towards you. Shooting centipede sections turned them into mushrooms, shooting mushrooms gave you points, and each stage was clear when a centipede was fully defeated. There were also other occasional bug impediments like fleas and spiders that you had to attend to as well. It was fast-paced, it had a trackball, it doesn't have the most robust cultural legacy now, but it was one of the big deal hits of the time. To their credit, the developers of the late 90s 3D Centipede achieved in a literal sense what they're presumably being demanded to do by their publisher, Hasbro Interactive. They made a 3D version of Centipede. In adventure mode, they tell a real half-assed Ender's Game Last Starfighter thing about a guy named Wally who gets drafted into an every 100 years war against the Centipede Scourge. I am an absolute sucker for terrible 90s polygonal cutscenes though, so I ended up disappointed there weren't more in the story. Instead, it gets right down to business. One thing I've really had to get used to in this project is that even though the Dreamcast feels like the future, some games are going to be old school, we do one thing here and that's it, sort of styles. This game promises Centipede, and that's what you get. Centipede drops you into every garden you've ever seen in a Nintendo 64 game and says, alright, have at it. Just like in the original Centipede, you're navigating through a field of mushrooms, trying to shoot every section of a rapidly encroaching centipede, while saving little guys and avoiding more chaotic enemies like spiders and flies. The difference is navigating through a 3D space, where you're rotating the camera as you move in each and every direction. The mushrooms still change color every time you down a full centipede. The difference is that now, once you defeat each of the several waves coming through in each area, you physically navigate to the next space across bridges and things. Every level has some secondary tasks as well, but pretty much what you're doing is centipede business and centipede business only. With the only derivation being an occasional boss battle that is so ridiculously, unforgivingly hard that it makes you pine for the boring, samey centipede levels. The game controls pretty decently, relatively responsive to quick reactions in a way that's necessary for a game like this. The camera work is mostly fine, which is an achievement for a game in this realm of this era, although occasionally, especially on the boss levels, secondary enemies like spiders can sneak up from behind while you can't look behind you, and you end up backing directly into them and dying. That was, in fact, the primary frustration of the boss levels, because you had no flexibility to take your eyes off the big guy, and I'd find myself backpedaling directly into death and having to restart the entire boss fight again. But overall, I had a lot less complaints about it than the other games in this project, or than I expected to. On original release, this game was remarkably unpopular. and roundly, passionately panned left and right, so I was really expecting a profound stinker. And what I got instead was a totally passable mediocrity. Admittedly, a repetitive and forgettable one, a classic rental game, as I laid out on the Toy Commander episode, but way less painful than I was expecting given its reputation. Centipede is not entirely dissimilar from other "okay you kids, go do some shooting" entries like Slave Zero, even if the setup is obviously much different. The creators of Centipede don't seem to have much confidence in their game, though, because not only is the entire original game included here as one of the 2 initial player options, but it is the default option if you don't move the stick, as if it is the primary mode, and the actual new game is just an additional secondary mode. Either way, you're never going to need to play this game. It will not add anything much to your life. People don't even play the original Centipede that much, compared to a lot of Golden Age classics. But it came up as my 37th assignment here, and it was way more playable and way less bad than I anticipated. Even if I'm never gonna play it again. Centipede is Centipede. And that's all she wrote. Next time, have you ever wanted to get together with a universe of your closest friends and shoot each other?